Hello, and welcome to tonight's Vicki and Carl Zeiger Virtual Insight Seminar. I'm Justin Waldman, Associate Artistic Director at the Old Globe, and on behalf of Barry Edelstein, our Erna, Finci, Viterbi Artistic Director, and Tim Shields, our Audrey S. Geisel Managing Director, I'm so glad you can join us tonight for this chat with two amazing women at the Old Globe, Globe's Associate Production Manager and Production Stage Manager, Leila Knox, and Hamlet on the Radio Production Stage Manager, Angie Nero. I am coming to you from the ancestral home of the Kumeyaay, who have been the stewards of these lands for generations. Before we get started, I'd like to take a second to recognize the people who make this event possible. A massive thank you to Vicki and Carl Zeiger for their generous support of the Vicki and Carl Zeiger Virtual Insight Seminar. And also a very special thank you to Joanne Kilty for her support of me in my role as host. The Globe and I are so grateful to all of you. This round of the Virtual Insight Seminars will focus on the Globe's production of Hamlet on the Radio and the incredible artists that are bringing it to life. Both Angie and Leila have had major part in bringing this thing together, so it's going to be really exciting to hear about how everybody actually got in the same room with them. Leila, Angie, and I are going to talk for about 40 minutes or so, and then I'll open up the floor to questions. And finally, as an FYI, we'll be recording this session to share in the future. Well, that's it for me. And now let's please welcome our amazing guests tonight. We have two of them. It's so exciting. It's our first three-pronged conversation. We'd like to welcome Leila Knox and Angie Nero. Leila, Angie, please make your magical entrance. Hello. Hello, it's nice to see you.
See you, Justin. Hello.
Thanks so much for being here tonight. It's such a pleasure. It feels like so full with two people. Where are you zooming in from?
I'm just about 20 minutes up the road from the Old Globe in my living room where I've been since March.
And you, Angie?
I'm at my kitchen table in University Heights.
Oh my God, we could actually probably hear each other if we opened our front doors and just were very, very loud. Well, that's excellent. Well, I'm going to embarrass you both for a little bit and give your bios because they are impressive, and you are both incredibly impressive human beings. So it's just such a pleasure to have you. I'm going to start in alphabetical order, so we'll start with Leila Knox. Leila holds two titles at the Old Globe. She's the Associate Production Manager and the Production Stage Manager. She has been here at the Globe for the past 17 years. She started as a stage manager and then moving to full-time staff. Her SM credits or production stage manager or stage management credits at the Globe include The Whitesnake, Othello, Who's Afraid of Virginia Woolf, Ace, Take Me Out, and Dr. Seuss's How the Grinch Stole Christmas, which she PSM'd for 14 years before giving up the reins in 2018. She comes out of stage management retirement every once in a while for special Globe projects like Thinking Shakespeare Live and In Zoom. And her Broadway credits include Dirty Blonde, Amour, and One Mo' Time. Her regional credits include Lincoln Center Theater, Manhattan Theater Club, Roundabout Theater Company, Second Stage, Playwrights Horizons, the Huntington Theater in Boston, where I think is where actually we met many moons ago, and 11 seasons with the Williamstown Theater Festival. She went to Northwestern University, and she's originally, even though she was born on Cape Cod, she grew up here in San Diego. So she is a local person made good in the Globe's world. So that everybody, that's a round of applause for Leila Knox. Hello, yay! We'd all be standing and applauding if we were alive. Now on to Angie Nero. Angie Nero has worked on over 20 shows at the Old Globe, including 9 world premiere musicals. She's the production stage manager for the 2 highest grossing shows in Globe history, Almost Famous and Allegiance, plus Bright Star, which he took to Broadway and on the first national tour, The Heart of Rock and Roll, October Sky, and many others. Her non-musical world premiere credits at the Globe include the highest grossing play in the Globe's history, Picasso de la Panegile. So Landy's a little bit of a good luck charm at the Globe. Life After, Kiss Me Kate, The Winter's Tale, and many more. She's also worked up the road in San Diego at our good friends in La Jolla at the La Jolla Playhouse and shows like Sideways and Midsummer Night's Dream. And she's worked around the country at great theaters like the Center Theater Group in LA, the Kennedy Center, the Huntington, and Berkeley Rep, and many others. She also owns a really, really cool Mustang. So she's fantastic. So again, everybody welcome Angie Nero. Big hellos, big hellos. Oh my God. That's like doing 2 bios is that's more. But it's a real pleasure. I ask this of everybody when we get started because I think it's fascinating and I think it's a great way to begin the conversations. It's like, how did you get into theater? What was it that, how did the bug bite you? Maybe we start off with Leila, if you'd like to start with that.
Sure. Well, I mean, I got interested in theater here in San Diego. The first Shakespeare show I saw was on the festival stage. I saw a ton of shows at the Old Globe growing up, and got my first paying job in theater up the road at the La Jolla Playhouse, selling cookies out front of the Mandel Weiss Theater. And then I continued. I realized I continued into theater in college and have been going sort of nonstop since then.
Excellent. Well, we did something right, I guess. And Angie, how about you?
I didn't get into theater until pretty late in life, at least as far as most of my colleagues are concerned. I started out as a dancer. I was pretty tap and jazz focused, and thought I was headed down that path, but my body and my knees had second thoughts about doing that. And so in college, after blowing out my second knee, a mentor of mine suggested I stage manage for the dance concert and walked me through what that person did. And I graduated college and worked for dance companies. And then a lighting designer friend of mine was on a production of Hamlet and connected me to the producer and said, come do this show with us. And I was like, I don't know anything about theater, but I have a script. And now I'm a member of Equity. I don't know what that is, but okay. And I did that, and my next show was a musical. It just fit with my dance background, and I never looked back. It's been 20 plus years, so yeah.
That's amazing. I never knew about the dance background. That's amazing. Yeah. This is one of the best parts. I get to learn so many things about people that I love and respect. So that's how you fell in, how you got into stage management. Leila, how did stage management become your profession?
Yeah, I had been pretty aware that I wasn't an actor. I don't come from a performance background, and I was sort of searching for where I fit into the theater world. And I signed up freshman year of college to be an assistant stage manager on a show, and they didn't find a stage manager, so they bumped me up for fall quarter freshman year. And on opening night, the set lit on fire, and I went on stage and I put the fire out in the middle of the final scene. And that adrenaline, problem solving on your feet, I was like, this is it, here we go. So I had been sort of become aware of what the stage manager was. And then through time at La Jolla Playhouse, as I was preparing to go to college and looking for that thing that still kept you in the rehearsal room, but wasn't performing.
That is literally a baptism by fire. Oh my God, that is a great first job. Okay, so you talked a little bit about how like you signed up for it and you did it. What a lot of people I don't think really quite understand what a stage manager does. Can Angie, maybe you can explain to us like what is a stage manager and what is your role in the production?
Yeah, I likewise had no clue what a stage manager did till I was well into my mid to late 20s. So I sort of figured it out along the way. But basically, the stage manager is sort of the one through line on any production. They're an integral part of getting a production prepped in terms of getting calendars together and contact sheets and sort of initial paperwork and organizing communication between the directors and the creatives. And then we facilitate and sort of manage the rehearsal room, making sure people are scheduled and actors are there and the work is getting done, communicating to all of the departments for costume needs or prop needs and changes with the sets. And then when we move into the theater, we put all the pieces together and work with the designers to make all of the magic happen. And then we are the ones that are with the show from opening to closing, and we give actors notes and make sure the show is well maintained, but we're also sort of the puppet master. We are the ones that are telling the crew to do all the cues every single night that the show is happening. So we kind of do a little bit of everything.
That's awesome. Leila, do you have anything to add?
Yeah, I mean, it helps. It's not that in a normal night that everyone couldn't take their own cues, but it's when something goes wrong that it's really helpful to have the information funneling and one person tasked with making a decision about the many choices on the table. So that's part of calling the show, is sometimes the same as the night before, and every so often very, very different than the night before. And it's your job as the stage manager to get the show out of whatever strait you find yourselves in.
Well, I'd love to actually talk about that, although that's a question I had a little bit later. But I think, like, I just from my vantage point as a director and someone who is a producer, I always find that I've learned very quickly that stage managers are the most important person in the entire show, because like nothing happens without a great stage manager, and it's one of those things where like if it's not going well, you know it really fast, and if it's going great, you just never know that anything was not supposed to be where it wasn't gonna just show up. So it's an amazing duck on the pond position in that, like, and there was a great meme going around this entire year where it was like, well, if we put stage managers in charge of rolling out the vaccine, it would be done in 2 minutes. Then we take 10. So I love that one. I thought of you both a lot about that. But when you talked about that, about the calling of the show, I think there's a real artistry in the calling of a show, because you can really, in both of these amazing stage managers, call a show so well. Can you tell me a little bit about like what it is to call a show and what that actually means, and how you prep a cue, and how you know if like an actor they're running a little late, like, or if they're running a little fast, how do you adjust?
Angie, you should take that, because Angie calls an amazing show, which is why we keep hiring her to do the hardest shows to call. It's such a pleasure to watch her put all the pieces together.
And it's hard to start. In tech rehearsal, for me, my OCD brain, I was a business major and a dance major. And so stage management just seems to have been this perfect meld of that for me. And so my biggest goal in the tech rehearsals is to make sure everything is perfectly timed and sort of flawless. So, if we're running an automation cues, which is, moving scenery, I want to make sure that it's moving with the music that is happening. And then it all sort of lands together so that you don't get stuck with a scene and the set still kind of finishing as the scene has started. And so I work really hard with the designers and with all of the crew to work out the timings of all that. We'll call the cue and it'll look like it's a little slow. So I'll ask the automation operator if they can speed it up. So it's all about sort of making this perfect visual with what's happening. And then in terms of the calling, with a musical, you can sort of time everything musically. So you learn throughout the tech rehearsal, if I say go, you're telling an operator to hit a button and then the cue happens. And so you learn what that delay is. So if I want, say, a cue to land on count 1, I may actually need to back it up and call it on count 7 before. So you kind of figure out and finesse what that is. And then the trickiest part, on any show, if you have an actor late, especially when there's moving scenery, once you get into the rhythm of the show, it's my job to know where I can push and sort of pull things a little bit. So if I have an actor late and it's certainly a safety issue, then I will wait to adjust cues, maybe make them a little later than they would be in a perfect show so that everybody is safe. And then certainly if we have to, we'll stop the show, but make those adjustments on the fly, which is why it's so crucial that stage managers are there every night, because performances shift and things happen. You miss a costume change. And so it's something that you can't just, sit in the dark and sort of phone it in. You are engaged on stage with the actors every single time they perform.
It's so amazing. I mean, I wish we had a book, because if you get a script, the script's usually this big, and then the stage manager's book is this big, because there's so much more material in it. But I love seeing in your books a lot of the time, like, that you have the music and you're calling the cues to like actual notes in the music. and lining something up with like this count, and that how to keep that listening and talking at the same time.
Yeah, and it depends. Every state, you know, I have a musical background. My dance background is a huge factor in all of that for sure. So to call off of a sheet of music or a piece of a couple of bars that I put in my script works for me. It doesn't work for everybody. Some stage managers don't use music at all. Some will put counts in their book. Other stage managers will use stopwatches. So you kind of find what works. And
then there's pieces like Barry's Thinking Shakespeare Live, which also needs a stage manager. And he has a script, but he has done it so many times that he sort of does a version of the script every time. So it's sort of, there's live event stage managing where you're just kind of feeling what's happening in the moment and familiar enough with what's to come that you can kind of time the landmarks.
Yeah, that's amazing, because sometimes he goes on a riff and then you got to move the PowerPoint. It's so neat. It's so great. I'm going to share a screen a little bit so we can look at some of the posters of some of the great shows that you all have worked on. So, but I just want to give us a little heads up that I was going to do that. One of the things, what is the big difference for both of you, for calling a musical versus calling a play?
Angie, you should take that one.
Okay. First, the biggest thing is the music for sure. The cues that we call are so integrated, and the timing and the rhythm of the music that's happening. That's sort of the biggest pressure. They also have a tendency, not always, but tend to be just bigger shows, especially ones with their eyes set on moving to Broadway. The sets are bigger. The technical side of things are much more complicated, not just the sets, but with lights and with sound, quick changes with the costumes. And musicals have large casts. A lot of sort of Shakespeare productions have large casts as well, but typically straight plays tend to be a bit smaller. So the scope of the show just is exponentially larger, I think, for the most part. There's certainly exceptions to that, but I think that's the biggest challenge. There's just more moving parts because you have a whole other department. You have a music department and an orchestra. And so you have all these additional players in the mix.
It's an extra access. It's not just X and Y, there's Z as well, right? Everything's in 3 dimensions.
Yeah.
So, and you mentioned a little bit earlier, Angie, about safety, and I think that that's a big overlooked thing about how responsible stage managers for safety on deck. I mean, Leila has worked on Grinch for so many years, and there's 10 kids running around, but there's also that set that is almost constantly moving. Can you tell us a little bit about that responsibility, about how, because like sometimes making a call to be safe means stopping the show, or changing a cue. What is that responsibility like to be on your show?
I think fundamentally it is a show, and that's not worth someone's life or limb. So ultimately, the stage manager has the God mic, they call it, so you can announce to the audience that you are stopping the show at any moment. You have the switch in the booth and you can do that. So I think keeping that in the back of your head as a moment that you can invoke if you need to is helpful, because it helps to place where the current crisis is. But tech, as Angie mentioned, is a huge time to take the actors out of the rehearsal room and into the stage and spend the time making sure that they know how to be safe, because they're having a ton of things thrown at them. It's been fluorescent lighting and suddenly it's pitch black, and then there might be bright lights shining in their faces. They have different clothing on. They're not wearing their normal shoes. And the stage has gone from a flat rehearsal floor to many, many levels and stairs. And then things could be flying in and out over their head that they're not controlling at all, or like Grinch, giant, enormous black and white pieces of scenery are moving. So we have a whole,
like a giant couch.
Yes. So we have a whole tech sort of orientation that we do with the Grinch kids in particular, but really for the adults as well, because they're out there too, to sort of take them through the show and make sure that it's safe. And when you're building a new play, I mean, Grinch on some level is easier because we know what the final product should be. When you're building a new play and trying to figure that out as you go, making sure that you're taking the time for safety is part of the push-pull of the tech process.
Excellent. Yeah, you know, it's interesting about that, like the physicality and all of that. But in lots of ways, at the end of the day, the job comes down to managing the personalities in the room as well. Like, so what is it like managing everybody? Because you become the person that everybody looks to for help in lots of ways. Like, how do I get this? What do I do? Where do I need to be? What am I supposed to do? Help me. And then, so you take on a lot of responsibility for people's well-being, but at the same time, so what's it like? And you've worked with some incredibly famous people in your careers that are really large egos. So how do you balance that part of the job with the technical aspects of it? Angie, why do you take that?
For me, I just approach everything as if I don't know the answer. I don't make any assumptions on how people are going to behave. Every company is different. Every combination of actors and creatives is different. So even if it's somebody I've worked with in the past, they might sort of behave differently on a different team. We try to have all the answers. We try really, really hard not to take things personally. I think when I first started, I was, a bit of a hothead, and I was, going to fight the good fight. And I've learned over the years and over the shows to let just a lot of it roll off of our backs, but we don't do it alone. We have assistant stage managers who are really good at fielding a lot of that stuff, especially on deck, and wardrobe deals a lot with those issues with actors, and so does the crew. In terms of answering questions and keeping them safe. And we have company managers who help them with all of their housing. It's important to remember, particularly with out-of-town actors, that they're away from home. And so we do our best to make them as comfortable as we can. And there's a lot of people working behind the scenes, but they're also the ones that are sort of out on the stage and just digging deep into their soul to find those emotional places we want those really great actors to be. And, I think there's some truth to artists just can have a tendency to be emotional and irrational. And we're part of that mix too, even though we're not the ones performing. But, I think it's the place that we all call home. So I think having an understanding for that allows us to be a little bit more gracious. And the other bright side about it, especially working in regional theater, is there's an end in sight. It's not a show that's going to necessarily run for 10 years. So, when they're super difficult, you just got to make it 3 months and you're good.
Yes, this contract ends. Excellent. Yeah. Well, that's a great answer. I love that. I'm going to move us over and talk a little bit about Hamlet on the radio now, our cause du jour. Yes. This is such a different world for us. I mean, we're very, very good at doing what we do. And then this seems like something, we did this thing, but we did it in a way that is entirely different now on the radio. And so I really want to go through some of like the nuts and bolts stuff of how it got put together, because we talk about how different it is and what's different. But I think both of your positions were so instrumental in actually actualizing getting this thing together, not just conceptualizing and thinking about how it moves, but like how we got everybody in the room, said all the words, and like the process of that is mind-blowing. So I want to start with Leila a little bit here, because as we got started, one of the first things we had to realize was that we were going to have 23 actors in different states, cities, and countries. And like, how are we going to get them all in the same place at the same time using the same equipment? Like, how would that even, usually we just put it's like, okay, cool, you're going to do the job. All right, get on the plane. We'll see you in a couple of weeks. And then they show up in a room and we can start. But we had to do something neat this time, which was this tech questionnaire that kind of started to do it. So can you tell us a little bit like what the point of this was, and how do we even know what to ask? How did we start to build out this way of getting everybody on the same page in a virtual room?
Yeah, so we've been, we've been learning this curve now for about a year. And, we started, our first big piece was in Zoom, which was very early on and very learn on the go. And then we've had the opportunity to partner with KPBS for the Grinch production in the fall, which was a huge step towards what we wound up with on Hamlet, which was recording a large number of people remotely and then taking that material and making it into a final product. So we took what we learned on Hamlet and collaborated with the sound team, and they decided that the best thing to do would be to ship identical kits to each of the actors. So this tech questionnaire comes out of that, because you need to know what kind of USB port they have in their computer, and is it an old Mac or a new Mac, and can they run an Ethernet cable from their router to their closet where they're going to be, and all sorts of really nitty gritty. And oh, by the way, they're having construction work done on the outside of their apartment building from 9 a.m. to 12 p.m. New York time. And so just trying to get a sense of their comfort level with technology, their comfort level with how they are set up at their house worked, how much they already had figured out. Cornell Womack has a voice recording studio in his dwelling, so he was beyond prepared. And it's weird because normally in normal times, we would do all of that for them and it would be seamless. So the fact that you're asking them to text you a photo of their router ports is really bizarre. But over the course of this year, we've become a little more comfortable with that. And I have a strange photo file of routers across America. So
that'll be great on the Apple TV.
And also then time zones. I mean, Angie, you guys were dealing with West Coast to East Coast. On Grinch, we had someone in Hawaii to East Coast, so a 6-hour span. So it's trying to make sure that everyone's agreeing on what time we're asking them to be available, and ask their roommate to be quiet during.
I mean, there's that too, because the other part is that usually when we have an actor, they're here and they are locked in, basically. They live in our housing, they come to our rehearsal room, and we can schedule them or what have you. And in this situation, it was like, this was an add-on to what else they were doing in their life. So we were a little bit more flexible. So it's we'll talk a little bit about daily calls in a little bit, but conflicts became a big thing, because people were like, I got a job. I'm not going to quit my job for the 6 days I'm working on this project. So like that became another thing too, when we were trying to figure out how to make that work, because one of the big things was finding how to get Hamlet in the room. Like we can't do Hamlet without Grantham, and getting Grantham in the room became a thing because he's very busy. He's working on TV and movies. So like you had a great conversation with him, right?
Yeah, I was in another Zoom meeting and I had texted Grantham, who had just cleared his schedule for this window, and he called me back and he said, I'm in Costco, but I can talk to you. And I just basically went down this questionnaire, like, do you have a Mac or a PC? How's about your Ethernet, and we went down it while he was just on his cell phone, and then talked further later. But that was what we needed to get the sound gear ready package to ship out the next morning to him, so that it had arrived in time.
So that's a great segue to this, this is the part of the tech setup package, the recording kit guide, which was created. So this was actually, I think it was a 9-page PDF that included an inventory and directions on how to set everything up, that was created for this project. I mean, you can see these are some of the pictures of items that were sent, and these are, the diagrams on how to connect it. Like, this is so out of our wheelhouse. How did this thing come into pass?
Yeah, so Paul Peterson, our sound director, and then Lindsay Jones, who I think you spoke with recently, figured out what equipment they wanted and how they were going to work it. And then Paul was instrumental in packaging and shipping everything as soon as we had casting. So Justin, you and I were feeding Paul shipping addresses left and right throughout January, as people were confirmed enough to send them a sound package, even if we hadn't finalized every last detail. And then we set up sound check-in sessions, which Angie and I tag teamed on, checking in with the actors to make sure that they had a time to work out this equipment that, again, would never be something we'd ask them to deal with in normal times, so that we could do all that and not bog down rehearsal once they got started in the room.
It was almost like a secondary IT degree to like take on the project, right? So there were different guides that were created that walk every actor through every piece of the thing that they needed to do. So this one is a quick start guide. So this was like how to turn on your recorder, right? So it's like every piece of it, trying to make sure that it was like that my 4-year-old, if he could read, could put it on and get it done. Because like if we had to walk every individual through it every day, we wouldn't get to recording. So like
right.
the prep work.
Yeah, sorry.
No, please, Angie.
No, the goal was that when rehearsals started at 11 a.m. West Coast time, that we could hit record and start recording at 11:01. So we figured out on the first rehearsal that all of this information, which they had in their email the week or two prior, was something people kept looking for. And so I just requested that we, let's put these into like quick little documents, and then we would start every Zoom session and they would be in the chat window. So actors could actually check into rehearsal a little early, open up that document, make sure they were good to go. So we would check in, say hi, and get started. We didn't have to step through it every time, which was awesome.
It's so smart. That's the work smarter, not more, right?
And I should say we were gathering on Zoom, like a normal Zoom, and then they were recording to these recorders. So Angie and I had a hilarious Zoom session with Alyssa Escalante, the ASM, where we flung ourselves around to breakout rooms to make sure we had all a common understanding of the Zoom technology. And then they were off and running.
Well, speaking of which, this is a Zoom session. Some people have seen some of these Insight seminars before, may have seen a picture like this, but like, this is the chaos of a rehearsal room on Zoom. And it's amazing. I mean, this is one of 2 screens. There's another screen, but so everybody's in their individual place. You can see in some of these pictures, like everybody's microphone that they use from the kit. But the other part about this is that there was a whole nother world beyond this, which was a communication channel just for stage management. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, we used something called Slack. I had never used it before, but Paul Peterson sent us a link and said, download this app and set it up, and this is what we're going to use to communicate, which was sort of like our headset communication if we were to have been on stage. It was basically a chat window that we could set up between Paul and myself and Lindsay and Barry. And so we could have chat sessions in Slack and not worry about actors being able to see it, just in case something, a little more sensitive was needed to be communicated. And Barry could say, I like this take and I don't like this one, and make those sort of editing choices as we went along, which helped move things quite along quicker. But the Slack channel was our sort of private chat room, so to speak. It's
so amazing. It's like that. Nobody's the wiser that there's a whole nother conversation going on, but that conversation is informing what's happening in the main room, because it's like, do we do it again or not? And rather than put somebody on the spot, right? Like, yes. Right. You can just be like, okay, we're good. Let's move on.
We'll say that Slack has been great. And the other thing that we've used on a few of the live events has been Discord, which, much to my teenage son's dismay, is like a gaming platform comm channel. And it's being hijacked by the American Theater as a headset channel. So he was horrified to have to help me set up Discord for the first time so that I could get on headset.
Oh my God, that's amazing. Are you gonna play some like what, I don't even know a game anymore. Like God of War, is that a thing? I don't know.
Sure.
Mario Kart, is that? That's where I stopped. That was a long time ago. But okay, so this is only getting us into the rehearsal room, right? This is all of that work got us into this room to start working. But then how do we do the work in the room? So this chart here is an entrance and exits chart, right? I learned it as a French scene breakdown. I have no idea why. Is that a thing, or am I wrong?
Yeah, so in Shakespeare, he writes it in, I mean, you can kind of do it by scene, but you're also marking where people enter. So like here in Act 1, Scene 2 up on the top, Marcellus doesn't show up until page 8. So you're able to see how not just all of who's called for all of Scene 2, but also within Scene 2, who is needed on which pages. And we had a version of this that included a lot more information from the stage play with the cast that performed on the festival stage, and then adapted it to this version.
I mean, it's so neat because what does this allow you to do? What is this allows you to break things down into smaller chunks? Yes?
Yeah, essentially. For me as a stage manager, this is the lifeblood of all the paperwork that we create. This is the thing that I use the most. In this version, it's a much more simplified version of what I would use on a big musical. On a big musical, I'd have like entrances and exits and where they're coming and going and how much time they have for a costume change and things like that. But the biggest tool that this serves is that, you know, when we're scheduling at the end of the day, if the director says, you know, I want to do, you know, Act 1, Scene 2, and then I want to jump to Act 2, Scene 7, I can look at this chart and make sure I've got all of the actors accounted for in the scheduling, and can jump around. If they say I only want to do pages 8 through 11, you know, then I know that Ophelia is not needed. The way that this document is structured, the dark gray shading means those actors have speaking lines. The light gray shading means that they're on stage and present, which is useful information when you're performing on stage, not so much when you're doing a radio play, but they don't have any lines. So for us, if they don't have any lines, we didn't need to call them.
They're not in the scene now.
They're not in the scene, not really. I mean, they're observers in the scene, but we don't need their voices down on tape. So I use this for scheduling. And then the red was just something that I stuck in on this production because we wanted a way for Barry and I to quickly make sure we had all the soliloquies recorded and noted. And so we just came up with this idea.
So this allows you to create this, which is a sample daily call, right? So you see, it's like, these are the last names of the actors, the pages which they're doing. But this goes back to that idea of conflicts, right? Because one of the things that we did, which was I hope it worked, is that we recorded all of the soliloquies. Like Grantham did those soliloquies on one day, so that it was like, here's the soliloquy day, because he doesn't have to talk to anybody else, and no one else needed to be called. So like that allows that kind of flexibility. But like what you were talking about is like, yep, from 9 to 12, like Patrick's building's being worked on, so you don't really want to record them. Like, how do you juggle that with also trying to get everything done?
I would just get Barry's wish list at the end of the day, and he'd give me a list. These are all the things I want to get done, you know, the following rehearsal. And, you know, I usually start by putting in page order because that just makes sense. Like, let's just keep going with the flow of the show. And then I cross-check that with another document that I create with conflicts and realize, oh, well, this scene can't be until after 3 o'clock. So that moves down, and this scene, and you just start the puzzle. And it's what we do on every show. This happened to be a little bit easier than some of the big musicals because they were all in one place. On a big musical, you could have 3. I think the most amount of rooms I've ever had rehearsals going on simultaneously was 5.
Oh my God. So that would
and
be
on top of that would be costume fittings as well. So
what would they be doing in the 5 different rooms?
On A Midsummer Night's Dream up at La Jolla with Chris Ashley, we had aerialists, and we had tumblers, and we had music, and we had dance, and we had scene work. So we had actors everywhere all the time, and it was constant push pull. They need to be in this room, we need to move them there. So this schedule, would look like this with probably 5 additional columns, because it would include all of the rooms and fittings. So
yeah, and as Leila said, fittings and press and
dialect sessions if anyone's taking on dialect work. Yeah.
Yep.
And it's just like a major puzzle every day. And I think one thing to think about, to remind everybody too, is that this is made the day before.
Right.
Which is a surprise to a lot of people, particularly as we cast The Grinch and people come join us for the first time, their first professional theater experience, the idea that we don't have mapped out what we're doing each day, because a lot of it is dependent on how things went that day. And then that night we figure out where we got to, what goals we met, what goals we didn't meet, and adjust the schedule accordingly. We have sort of an idea of how we want to structure it that comes from the director and the calendar. But then the nitty gritty of that is very, very fluid until about an hour or 2 after the end of the rehearsal day.
So it's maybe a 14-hour turnaround until you find out 14 hours before you need to be called, maybe, or 12 hours.
12 is the rule for on an equity contract, as long as the actors have 12-hour notice. Yeah. And I think, as an actor, especially when you're in residence, you just assume you're called until you get the schedule. So.
And then you go to the beach.
Yeah, right.
So once we got everybody in the room, knowing what they're doing, then we had to figure out how the actual process is a lot different than a regular rehearsal process, because normally you walk around, you write down their blocking, where they're going, and then that actor is responsible for remembering that stuff and like what they were supposed to do. But this is like, we kind of had one shot at it to say, we're recording this scene this day, hopefully we get it. So this is a session tracking document that shows like each take. Can you talk us through how this was used, Angie?
Yeah, so our associate sound designer, Nina Field, was basically keeping track of this. So she was keeping track of how many times actors started and stopped recordings. So at the end of the night, she could say, upload files 2 through 7. And so that was notated on this document, but she would, the first take, we would get notes from Barry, this one's okay, but let's try for something else. And then on take 2, he'd say, yeah, that's great, print that. So we would flag that one in green and say, that's a good one. There were pages where they were flagged in red because somebody forgot to hit record in a group scene. And so that became useless. So our big job was making sure that literally every line and every word on the page was being recorded at some point. And then the sound team would take the best takes. So sometimes the scene would have 1 or 2, sometimes the scene would have 3 or 4 of the really good versions, send them to Barry. Barry would listen to them and say, I want to go with take 2. That's the one we're going to use for the final product. Or he would say, I like, minute 1 through 3, but on this version, but then I like minutes 3 through 5 on this other version. And so sound would combine them. And sometimes Barry would say, you know what, none of these are working for me. We need to try again. And so we had a list that we would create of all the retakes that we would do. So,
I mean, it's an amazingly detailed document, all of this stuff, because it has to be so nuanced, because if you just don't get something, you can't be like, oh, can you just say it? Because then we have to get everybody back in to a room on Zoom and do it. It like has to make sure that every line is covered. And that's what this document does. Right? Yeah. This is the page tracking document. So this document has every line in the show in it. This is a really big Excel sheet that is long and long and long, but like making sure that every single thing that is printed in the script is covered. So just the minutia of that, of making sure that everything got covered. How do you take responsibility for that?
I can't. This was Alyssa, our ASM, created this document. She was working pretty closely with Nina in terms of tracking making sure we had everything recorded. I tend to be a bit more old school, so I was just checking off things on my script in my binder. But she could really go through and confirm and come back and say, we remember we have to catch this line again, or remember so and so wasn't called that day, we missed this, thank you, madam, or whatever it was. So this became a crucial document for making sure we didn't miss anything.
Oh my God, it's unbelievable. I mean, that is, 2 hours of Shakespeare, every single word having to be accounted for. Yeah. But it's not only the words though, right? There's this document, which is the sound cue document. All right. So not on a regular show, there would be like a group people standing behind of like extras, and they'd just be like, peas and carrots, rabble, rabble, rabble. In this, you had to actually decide what those things were and then record them. So what is in here that is new or different, and something that you had to take ownership of?
So Barry went through the script and sort of highlighted certain things just to draw our attention to them. So like crowd noises, or the crowd rejoices. Those things, we had to make sure that we were recording them. Any sort of applause moments that would just happen on stage with an ensemble had to be recorded. And then there were other things in the script, like flourish, and there's a musical moment, or the sting of the ghost. And so we knew that those were more sort of sound cues. But in the original production, there was also original music. So as we started going through Hamlet on the radio and looking back at the archive of the stage production, we were realizing, we like these musical moments, so we need to get those in the script as well. But the script had some edits to it from the stage production. So how do those fit with the new version of the script? So those were in there, but also things like Claudius and Gertrude kiss. We had to record those moments. And how do you figure out how to do that and not make it like a cheesy radio play? And we figured that out. And, there's just sound cues that Lindsay will compile in the final product that are just sound effects that we have never heard, and we'll hear them when everybody else does. And then there were things that came up during rehearsal and during the recordings, and Barry said, it'd be really great if we heard the sound of a page being turned here. So you'd frantically type that in. So it has everything you could think of that you need to be able to hear for a production that you can't see.
It's an amazing document, because I think it just shows like how intricate this is. Rather in some ways, like we have more control because like we're able to micromanage every single second, but also we have to account for every single second. It's not like, oh my God, run out there and yell something, say yay. You can't do anything post facto, right? It has to be pre-planned for, which is amazing. And like, I just think that thinking about all of this is just like why stage managers are the greatest people on earth. Is I'd be like, I don't know, man, I think we got it. And they'd be like, oh, we forgot Act 2.
I mean, Angie does that all that, on Almost Famous, we were getting script changes. I mean, that minutia also matters in a live production when you have the cue for an automated piece of scenery and that cue line has changed. It's the same, like big picture and attention to detail at the same time.
Mm-hmm. I just had one last thing to ask, and for you, Leila, is like, now that everything is in the can, as it were, I'm learning terminology. I feel like kind of cool. No, I'm not. But the way that we present it is even different. And that's a big thing that you and I have been having, you and I and a lot of others have been having to work with, because we are presenting this in at least 6 different incarnations of how we make it, because it's part 1 and part 2 in the whole thing on KPBS. And those are 3 separate recordings. And then we'll be presenting it on our YouTube page that'll be accompanied with visuals from the production. And then a podcast version. And each of those things have to have different intros and extras. So how is that, what is this process like, the post-production like? of getting it getting it out to the community?
Yeah, I think it's again sort of that attention to detail about exactly what is happening from the moment it starts to the moment it ends. And some of it was having actors record their names for voice credits. So getting Angie a complete list of what they should say and what that text was, so that she could funnel that into the rehearsal day. And now, yeah, Justin, you and I, and with our partners at KPBS, just trying to figure out who exactly is recording what and whether that text has been approved. And then some of it has to get to Lindsay to embed within the opening sound sequence as well. So it's a more collaboration in a different but similar vein.
It's just fascinating. It's like, oh my God, yeah, we have to, that's different. All right, put that on the list. We'll do that too. So it's just, it's an ever, the landscape of this is so detailed on the front end, so that the back end actually gets out in a way that's really cool. That's how we want it to come out. So we have some great questions. I'd like to move on to that. This question is from Vicki Zeiger, actually. Hi, Vicki, how are you? What was the most terrifying situation that you have each been faced with in a theater?
I had a first preview where scenery fell into the audience, so that was a good one. Also, we made it on that poster for that show made it on the wall in Joe Allen's, which is famous in New York for flops. So
also something lighting on fire in your first show.
Well, yeah, we could start there
too. Angie, how about you?
I was gonna say, I've had fire on stage too. It's not fun. Gosh, there's a number of them. For me, it's anytime actors are flying in the air is terrifying. Thank God I've had no accidents or injuries there. The biggest nail biter for me is anytime there's a hole in the floor that a trap opens and something goes awry, either other scenery is not in place that forces the actors in a place that becomes super dangerous. So I've had a number of shows that I've stopped and just because it's not worth the risk, of somebody falling in a hole or getting hit by something because the timing is off. Mm-hmm. They're varied.
Is that the time when you're on the God mic? Hold.
It is. Yep. Yeah.
When that voice comes, it's usually the stage manager. So.
Yeah. And there's usually lots of yelling before that. Do I have to stop the show? Are you making me stop the show? Ladies and gentlemen. So I would say the most fearful moment for me though, in my history of doing shows, I've had two medical emergencies that were quite frightening. And anytime that were not a result of the show at all. We had one actor with a heart attack and things like that are just so beyond your control, but they're happening in your space. You can't not take that on, and those are scary.
No, man, that is terrifying. Was he okay? Are they okay?
Yeah. No, all is well.
And the audience was fine that the scenery fell towards. So.
So this is a great practical question. I should have asked this. Thank you for bringing it up. Where are you physically located during the show? And does it change depending on the show or the theater?
Sure. I mean, in the Old Globe Theater, the booth is in the back of the orchestra. So if you turn around and look in the center of the orchestra, you'll see the stage manager there. In the festival, the booth is behind the last row of the audience. And in the White Theater, it's on one of the sides with a slightly tinted glass. Mm-hmm. But some people call from off stage, and from there's been any variety. I've called a show from a catwalk before. I don't know, Angie, where you've called shows from.
Same, all over the place, backstage, on stage. I did one show on stage next to the drummer. And the whole concept was that you see the stage manager standing there. And so I stood there and called the show on stage, and it varies, and it's somewhat dependent on the venue.
Mm-hmm. I've definitely seen ones where people have to call totally off monitors, where they're in the wings, like stage right, stage left, and you can't even see the stage. You're kind of tucked in behind.
Yeah, the stage manager for Tale of Despair called from off stage right with monitors. So.
Yeah. I remember back in the day, those were small little like TVs, like those little CCTVs. I was like, I can't watch the Brady Bunch on that. How are you going to watch the show?
Yeah.
So this is a great question from Sue Parker. It seems like a lot of the actors might have more film experience and TV experience going into something like Hamlet on the radio. So like was it kind of old hat for some of them? Especially you mentioned Cornell, Leila, being a professional voiceover artist. He's the voice of the NFL. So he is a good gig. But like, was it a steeper learning curve for the tech staff and the behind the scenes crew?
Oh, that's a good question. I can speak on behalf of what I witnessed in the rehearsal room with the actors, or the Zoom room rather, but it didn't really much matter if they had film and TV experience or not, because even radio is different than film and TV. So I think the fact that the cast was there and excited to be there and willing to like work on a project and also revisit a project that most of them had already done, and also bring something new to it. You know, Barry was listening in a very different way than he would have if we were performing it on stage. So they were game to sort of try it all and in a lot of ways just try it again. And for me, my job, the overall job of like managing and overseeing a show really didn't change much. It just was a sort of different format, but maybe Leila can speak more technically.
Yeah, I mean, I think part of what this time has taught me is that if you go back to the core of we want everyone to have a room to work in and do their best work, then the rest of it you can kind of figure out around the edges. But we're all learning. I mean, even actors that work on film and television normally have an entire support staff, and now we're asking them to plug things in. So everybody's slightly off kilter, but the goal of the rehearsal spaces that we form is to make it a safe space where they can come and bring their best work. And whatever format that rehearsal room comes in. Right now it's Zoom.
Well, you both are amazing supporters of actors. So I think like every space that you are in charge of is a safe space in that way. You let everybody do their best work. And that is the best part about why it's so amazing to be able to work with both of you all the time for many years. And it's just a real huge pleasure. I have one last question before I let you guys go. And this is a great question and a very hopeful one. What are you most looking forward to when we return to live shows?
Oh, all of it. I can't wait for that first moment where we're sitting around a table and the actors open up their scripts and start a first day of rehearsal, which is always a happy day of meeting new people, reconnecting with old friends, and then it's like first day of school, starting out on a new project. And I think maybe then we'll all just cry for a little while and then get going. So right. I can't wait.
No, and I right on the heels of that will be the first audience, because they bring a whole other energy to any piece that we do, and they're sort of like the last piece of the puzzle of what we do in our livelihood, and putting that all in there. But I'm also kind of excited to see what changes come about in the arts just in general, how are our missions and our priorities changing, and how does that inform what we create? I think is exciting. It's a time for change and reflection and all of those things. And we can't not be affected by what this last year has been. And, as artists, you can't not bring your life into your work. So I think that's exciting.
That is beautiful. And it's a great place to end this wonderful conversation, this hopeful look to the future. It's such a pleasure. Thank you both so much for being a part of this and giving us your time and your insight and your attention to detail, which I wish I had. I am in awe of both of you. Thank you so much. I have a little wrap up, but feel free to stick around or you guys can pop off. I'd like to once again thank Vicki and Carl Zeiger for their support of these Insight seminars, and Joanne Kilty for her support of my part in this. A huge thank you to our philanthropy department, especially Haley Meyer and Matthew Lovegood, who do all the hard work behind the scenes to make this program possible. They make the PowerPoints and all those things, because I just don't know how to do that. Excuse me. Our next Insight seminar, we'll be talking to the wonderful actor, Michael Genet. He plays the ghost, the player, and the gravedigger in Hamlet on the radio, as he played it 2017. He is the slash guy in this one. He's been on Broadway in Wicked and The Prom, films and TV like The 25th Hour, Ugly Betty, Law and Order. He's also an accomplished novelist and screenwriter, which is fantastic. That's very cool. So we'll be talking to him in 2 weeks. We're doing these talks every other Thursday, talking about the various aspects of building Hamlet on the radio until the show's premiere on KPBS on April 23rd. Please check out the Globe's website for more information about the show itself. And you can see all the incredible humanities programs that we put around it and surrounded it with. That's it for tonight. Thank you again for joining us for the Vicki and Carl Virtual Insight Seminar. Stay safe, and we'll see you again in Balboa Park very soon. Thank you again. Bye, everyone.